Because when you do a critical analysis of the last time people of African descent were ruling a world power, not just a country, not just having influence, not a puppet regime, but actually was ruling a world power. The last time it happened was in Kush. Most of the Kushites that were populating the area that we now call Nubia, many of them migrated west and then were stolen during the transatlantic slave trade or chose to sail across the Atlantic Ocean, whichever way you like to have it pan out to make you feel better, and they're here in America. So the last time that genetic bloodline, that seed, all those West African tribes, the last time that genetic seed ruled a world power was in Kush, and it was strategic. It was planned. It was well thought out. And each successor within a certain bloodline carried out a certain aspect of that black print. You gotta go back to the ruler named Alara. Because Alara is the one that all of the other most famous Kushite Nubian pharaohs that they call rulers, but what we call Kores or Kares, and the queens were called Kentaki or Kintaka, right? And they mistranslated as Candace, but each successor carried out a different step in the black print for world dominance. And it was set forth by Alara, and we know it was set forth by Alara because all of his successors paid homage to him. Shabaka, Shabataka, Taharka, they all pay homage to Alara. Pianki, they all pay homage to Alara. He set the black print. He set the philosophy. The philosophy that he set forward was the philosophy of the deity Na-ptah. And it becomes more important when we comprehend your traditional African cultural philosophies and theologies that were productive, that actually led to something significant taking place. It becomes more noteworthy that it was the deity and the philosophy associated with Ptah in particular that led us to being a world power. And we have to also identify what was it that brought us down and what is it that keeps us down. And I'm going to get into it. So the first step of the black print was carried out by the warrior Kare, the warrior ruler Pianki. Pianki was a manifestation of the philosophical idea that there is no liberation, there is no true liberation without bloodshed. So much so did he embody that principle that he would make his warriors make ritual ablution. They would have to clean themselves like they were getting ready for prayer before they went into battle. That's how serious he took it. It's a carving by Pianki where he says, Egypt has lost its way, and it is now the responsibilities of us Kushites to restore it to the greatness that it once had in the past. And they did everything. They had all the practical applications, all the sciences necessary to let everyone know that that was the true seed. They built more pyramids than any place else in the world, 220. They paid honor and homage to the mother because more of those pyramids were built for women than they were for men. They had the sciences, they had the arts, they had the gold. They let you know this is the true seed here. Pianki manifested the struggle principle. In the philosophy of the deity Ptah, there are two principles that are very important. There's Ptah and then there's Hotep. Ptah and then there's Hotep. Now, people familiar with Hotep, it means peace. Ptah, one of the many meanings of it, is to open. It's a separation. It's a struggle. You follow what I'm saying? And so, Ptah or PTH in the Metronetra and the hieroglyphics is the reverse of HTP. Peace if you're willing to fight for it. Peace if you're willing to struggle for it. Liberation if you're willing to work for it. Pianki was a manifestation of that aspect of the philosophy. Then his successor, after they took Egypt, under the direction and leadership of Pianki, after they took Egypt, his successor, Shabaka, had to uphold the philosophy of science. That was his primary thing. So he inscribed what's called the Shabaka stone. Now, if you are unfamiliar with the Shabaka stone, I'm gonna make it very simple. The Shabaka stone is the last time, prior to this time, someone from that bloodline inscribed and spelled out what most mundane scientists call the scientific and mathematic method. Shabaka spelled out the whole philosophy in a theology of the deity Na-ptah. And he started it off by saying, I'm inscribing this philosophy in stone because the original had become consumed by parasites to the point where it could not be completely comprehended. Stop. Did he mean that the actual papyrus had been eaten by parasites? Or was there a parasitic type of personality? Was there a parasitic type of energy that had gravitated towards the philosophy, distorted the philosophy, put remixes and spins on the philosophy, so much so to the point where it could no longer be comprehended and it was no longer productive and useful? So Shabaka had to restore it. He said, I'm doing this for my father Ptah. Let this document stand as a monument, as a pillar in the house of Ptah, so that I may live forever, eternally, immortally. This was the work of Shabaka Neferkare, the Cushite, who made it a point to uphold the philosophy of science, to uphold the philosophy of evidence, experience, and reason, who made it a point not to uphold or not to solely dwell on faith, belief, and the hidden. Now, we got to talk about that because faith, belief, the hidden, the unknown, that is the philosophy that led to the decline of Kush, the decline of Nubia, and ultimately keeps us in the position that we're in today. In the ancient Nile Valley culture doctrine, the deity that was the personification of faith, belief, and the hidden, the unknown, was who? Amun. He was the personification of spookism. Now, let me make a point before I go into it. It's not that the unknown faith and belief is wrong and anything bad with it. Anybody who tells you that they don't believe anything, they full of it. You cannot go through your life without ever believing something. But when you hold steadfast, when you hold on to the belief after you've been proven that that belief is incorrect, that's problematic. When you choose to uphold something hidden and unverified, when there's a way to verify it, when there's a way to get verification, when there's a way to gain evidence, experience, and reason, when you choose to hold on to the hidden, when you can get verification, when you can rise from the noon, that's problematic. And both Amun and Nun were members of the A.C.E. I'm going to talk about this. Let me talk about this. Amun and Nun were members of the A.C.E. The A.C.E. were the deities that were revered and worshipped in Hermopolis. The center of the eight was the deity Tahuti, who was symbolized by the head of an ibis bird. The A.C.E., the males and females, were symbolized by the heads of frogs and snakes, respectively. Now, why would it be important to symbolize principles that represent the unknown, the indefinite, the infinite, all of this basically unverified, these principles of unverification? Why would it be important to symbolize them but the heads of snakes and frogs, and then put a being in the center of them, the ibis bird? What does ibis birds do to snakes and frogs? Well, you had to spend some time in areas around ibis birds and snakes and frogs in order to know what they do. ibis birds consume snakes. Ibis birds consume frogs. Jahuti was representative of thought. Therefore, thought consumed the unknown. Thought consumed the indefinite for something definite. I don't know how many different ways that our ancestors could have told us in mythology and parable. You know what I'm saying? Putting sugar, they water that shit down, they put sugar on it, trying to get us to comprehend the point that you do not dwell on the unknown, the hidden, the unverified, the indefinite. You don't dwell on that when there's a method and a means to get evidence, experience, and reason. Come on, bro. How many different ways can they dress it up? And so after we took Egypt, after that bloodline took Egypt, then they started integration. Integration always is a compromise. Integration always is a compromise. And it means that you end up losing something, some aspect. And if you're great, that means it makes you lose some aspect of your greatness. So once we took Egypt, we integrated and we started adopting the same philosophies that led Egypt to its downfall to begin with. Amunism, hiddenism, the doctrine of the unverified, the doctrine of spookism. If you do not believe that Amun, the personification of the hidden, and the philosophy and the theology and the cosmology around that, if you do not believe that is the doctrine of spookism, then, my friend, why is it that the three major monotheistic religions all seal their prayers, they seal their rituals by calling on Amun? In Hebrew, it's Umain, a derivative of Amun. In Christianity, it's what? Amen, a derivative of Amun. And Islam is Amin, a derivative of Amun. Now, Amun, as much they made a point if Amun was on our side. Right? That's why the parable, the line that says, if the slave master and the slave are calling on the same God, something is wrong. Whether it was Arabs enslaving us, Christians enslaving us, or Jews exploiting us, they all called on Amun, or a derivative of Amun, at the end of their prayers. So whose side is that doctrine of the unverified and the hidden? Whose side is it on? It can't be us. It can't be us. Especially when it's the opposite of the doctrine of Na-ptah, which led us to greatness the last time we were great. In Revelations in the Bible, they say Amun is there. He said, these things saith the Amun. Amun. These things, this is what Amun says, who was there at the beginning of the creation of God. The beginning of the creation of spookism, Amun was there. So once we took Egypt and we started integrating and we accepted the doctrine of the hidden and the unverified, we accepted the doctrine of Amun, then that led to the downfall. Then we got in wars with Assyria. Assyria kicked our ass. We had to migrate from East Africa to West Africa, setting up empires along the way. Mali, Songhai, Ghana. We set up empires as we migrated west after we got our ass kicked. And now every tribe in Africa, now hold on, we gotta look at this. Because this is important. You think I'm just talking. Every tribe in Africa, damn near every tribe in West Africa that migrated there as a result of adopting the doctrine of Amun and they getting their ass kicked and having to leave, still calls on Amun or a derivative of that. Whether it's Inyame, Amun, you hear it. Whether it's Amma, right? Whether it's Amu, every tribe in West Africa still calls on Amun and still puts that principle of the hidden at the highest point. Now, if that was on our side, it wouldn't have allowed us to be enslaved. It wouldn't have allowed us to be colonized. I'm showing you something. That's the doctrine of the unverified. And the doctrine of the unverified is what led to our downfall and what keeps us downfall. Keeps us where we're at. Keeps us non-productive. Keeps us dwelling in the noon, the infinite possibilities, without any definite realities. That's why our moon and noon sound so similar. The letters M and N even actually shared the same hieroglyph at one point in time. And even today, when you don't know something, what do you say? M and N, moon and noon, unverified, I don't know. We need verification. We need the doctrine of Na-ptah. We need the science of sciences and the science in sciences to become productive creators. No longer victims of circumstance, but creators of circumstance. No longer products of our environment, but creators of environments. I wrote in the architect book that I plan for one day for my seed to be building planets. Building planets. People laugh at it. I'm like, that's because you on the doctrine of the unverified. They work hand in hand. You know what I'm saying? It's not, you don't give all acknowledge and praise to one thing and then disregard the other. We comprehend that the doctrine of the hidden, the doctrine of the unknown has its place, but it's never and nowhere in the cosmology has it ever been to stay in that state. Never has it been to stay in that state. And then they ask, well, they call on Na-ptah in spookism too. They call on Na-ptah in Islam. Isn't Al-Fatiha the first chapter of the Quran? Fataha? Isn't that Na-ptah? And I say yes. Yes, it was. But just like Islam was the third degree and the last religion of that spookism doctrine, Na-ptah is the first chapter in that surah of that holy book for that doctrine. That means what? Na-ptah marked the beginning of the end. That is the doctrine of Na-ptah. That is the doctrine of the Ta'ites. That is the doctrine of the Cushites when we were in power. And this is the redemption of the Cushite bloodline.